Hello and welcome back. We got a great chapter for you. We've got many different examples on how to cut out hair. So we're starting with cutting out straight hair. Now we're going to start with a selection. We're going to use the pen tool to basically cut out the general shape of the hair, and then we're going to be filling it in with the brush tool, make it super realistic. All right, let's jump into Photoshop, show you how it's done. So let's go ahead and grab our image here, how to cut out straight hair. We're in chapter 3, section 1. I'm just going to click and drag that into Photoshop. So we have relatively straight hair. Now, the whole goal when we're cutting out hair like this is we want to get the general shape of the hair, and we can do that with tools like the pen tool, which we'll do in just a second. And then we have some, little edge work and things like that, right around here, and that we want to take care of. And the best tool for the job really is the brush tool. Now you'll notice also the hair kind of is a little bit out of focus here, so we're going to be using the blur tool to kind of match the focus area. So really, really great. Now this should work with any straight hair that you're working on in Photoshop. So let's start off with our pen tool. I'm going to hit P for the pen tool, and we're just going to kind of trace up this way. So let's click and drag up in this direction. There we go. And I'm going to kind of ignore this hair that's kind of going off to the side there for now. There we go. Let's hold Alt or Option and bring that up a little bit. And basically I'm just following the natural line of the hair, and I'm trying to stay slightly inside the boundary of the hair. That's my goal there. Let's hold Control or Command and you can move these at any time. There we go. Now we'll click up there. I'm going to hold, if you get something like this and you want an angle, just hold Alt or Option and click and drag this point and bring it up there, and check that out. We got an angle now. There we are. The great thing about the pen tool is that you can change your pen paths at any time. So you're really just never stuck with any paths. Like if it's not in the right place or you didn't add the right amount of curvature, it's never going to come back and haunt you. You can change it at any time. There we are. Let's just bring that down there. And right down there. So pretty simple. Now let's go back to our starting point here. Let's go ahead and click there. I'm going to right click and we're going to go to Make Selection. And in this case we're going to feather this by 1 pixel. Just makes a slightly softer edge. Let's hit OK and click on our layer mask. Okay, looking good. Now I'm going to grab a solid color fill layer. We're going to go to white and pop that right underneath our subject. Okay, so now what we want to do is basically we want to make sure that the edge of the hair looks realistic, because right now it just does not look realistic at all. But we're on a really good pace here. We've done quite a bit of the work. So what we're going to do is go back to our layer mask and we're going to use our brush tool. Earlier in chapter 2, we made a custom brush that basically resembled individual hair, and we're going to be using that brush here. We can remake it from scratch, just so we're all on the same page. Let's go to Window and down to our brush settings. Okay, I'm going to just start with just a regular soft round brush. There we are. And my goal here is to make something that kind of looks like hair. So we're going to bring our hardness up to about 50%. That's a good hardness level for hair. We're going to bring our brush size way down, and we want the size to wind up being about the same size as the individual hairs. There we go. So in this case, we'll just bring it smaller. And you want to kind of get these brushes, you want to kind of build these for individual images. There we go. Based on if you're closer or farther away to your subject, hair is going to be larger or smaller. Now here in our shape dynamics, you want to be sure you turn your size jitter on to pen pressure if possible. If you're using a mouse, that's okay. You can just set this to fade. And we went over that in chapter 2. There we go. And we're going to have our minimum diameter of 0. And I'm going to set my transfer. The control is going to be set to pen pressure. So that just creates a relatively realistic strand of hair. Again, I am using a pressure sensitive tablet. This is a Wacom Intuos Pro tablet. If you have any questions, we have a great free episode on how to set up your tablet. Just type in Wacom in the search bar on Flern, you'll find it. That all works pretty well. Now we have something that kind of looks like hair. So let's just delete this layer, and we're going to work on our layer mask. So here in our layer mask, my goal is to kind of paint hair, there we go, that kind of follows the boundary of our subject's head. So we're going to paint with white on our layer mask, and I'm not going to try to, paint a hair that goes all the way down here. You can go as long as you feel comfortable. But basically I just want to make this edge seem a little bit more realistic. So I'm just kind of painting, kind of starting on the inside boundary of my subject's hairline, going out and then coming back in. I find that's kind of the best technique for making the hair look realistic. There we go. And if you make a mistake, not a big deal, just you can erase it, or you can just hit undo. There we are. And I'm just kind of painting a few things there. So it kind of helps out to kind of paint a couple far away pieces of hair and then kind of build up. There we go. And I think straight hair is relatively simple, relatively straightforward to cut out. There we go. You can already see we're looking much more realistic up there. There we are. Kind of come down here. It's amazing what just a few strands of hair, kind of outside of the hairline can do for realism. Do really quite a bit. There we are. Now here we have some hair that kind of comes out in this direction. So we'll just be kind of painting it out there. I'm going to hold Shift and click on our layer mask so we can see what our layer mask looks like now. Beautiful. Now I know some of these hairs, let's just make this background a little bit darker here. I know some of these don't look light in color, like when, let's just undo that. See, some of these kind of get darker, but we can use clipping masks to fix that. So let's make our background a little bit darker so I can see what I'm doing for a second. Kind of want to build up a little bit of a core here, and then paint some hair out from the core. I'm going to make my brush smaller for a couple flyaways and things like that. And keep in mind, we can always get our colors accurate through clipping masks. Okay, looking good. So going up here, that looks good. Let's go ahead and make our background light colored again. We'll come back here and worry about the color in a minute. Okay, back on our layer mask, we're just using our brush tool again, and we're just painting more white. So this time, kind of painting in a little bit of a circular direction here. I'm going to hit R for my rotate tool, and we're just going to rotate that back around. That just gives me a little bit more of like a natural angle. Alright, we'll do some flyaway here. That's important. You don't want to completely ignore flyaway hairs and whatnot, especially in like areas like this. If you do, it's just not going to look realistic. Maybe if you're working on a photograph where someone has like a lot of hair gel or something like that in their hair, you could remove most of the flyaways. You're always going to have some hair that just kind of like does what it wants to do, And that's what's really going to make it look realistic. There we are. Hit R for the rotate tool, kind of rotate that back around there, And then go back to our brush tool. You can see I'm just kind of painting horizontally now, because it's just like a nice natural movement for me on my tablet. There we go. We'll do a couple more flyaway here. Maybe just some. There we are. Make my brush a little bit smaller. I'll just do a couple small flyaways there, and that'll help it make it look realistic. Alright, back to a slightly larger brush, and let's just kind of paint this edge in there. Cool. Now I'm going to paint with black a little bit, because I feel like we could kind of use a little bit of a boundary there. And then let's just paint with white again. Good deal. So let's hit R for the rotate tool. There we are. R, and then I'm going to hold Shift to get it right back up to here. Let's take a look at our layer mask. Hold Alt or Option and take a look at the layer mask, and you can see we're looking really nice. Let me just paint white a little bit more, just right along here. But all in all, I think we've got a really great looking layer mask. You can see it looks like we've got a great selection of hair. So let's go back to our image now. The next thing we want to do is add a little bit of a blur, because the hair is pretty well defined at this point, and you can see the image itself. If I hold Shift and click on the layer mask, the image itself does get a little bit out of focus, so we want to make sure we mirror that in our image. To do that, all you have to do is grab your blur tool. This is such an awesome tool. The blur tool will just allow you to paint blur, and you can do this on your layer mask. So click on your layer mask, and then you can just paint in blur. So you can see if I just go over it and over it and over it, it just blurs and blurs and blurs. So the trick is to just paint a little bit until it starts to look like it just blends in with the rest. There we go. Maybe I'm going to blur some of these edges a little bit more. The blur tool is nice for this application. I actually like it more than doing like a Gaussian blur. The reason being there is you can choose how much blur based on how much you paint over it. So, for instance, if you want a hair to look like it's going further away from the camera, you could blur the end of it more. There we are. Like that one I'm going to really blur. Just gives a little bit more variation, and that variation is good because it reads in your head as less Photoshop and more realistic. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hold Alt or Option now and click on our layer mask so we can see the edge is nice and blurred, and we're looking really nice. Let's just go over here. Make sure we did in fact blur the edge. I'm going to blur the edge of our subject's sweater actually too, because it's too sharp of an edge right now. So you can see I could just paint on here and kind of soften that edge up too. And that's going to help that look more real too. Okay, I think we're looking great. So let's hold Alt or Option and click on our layer mask once more. We got a couple of things to take care of. First being that some of this hair is just showing up as some of the background. That's not a big deal. We're going to create a new layer. Option Command G will clip that, or you can always right click and go to Create or Release Clipping Mask. And now we're just going to use our brush tool. We're going to choose a slightly larger brush. Okay, and we're just going to paint some of these light colors on here over top of the existing layer. Right now they're picking up some of the background color, and what we're doing is just painting a new color on a new layer. There we are. And because we're using clipping masks, it simply replaces. There we are. Let's just hold Shift, and I'm going to sample this color from the hair on the original one, and go ahead and paint that in at the ends there. There we go. So if this is on a dark colored background, it should still look like you know, that hair. And on a light colored background, it should still work as well. Looking really, really good. Now, we do want to go ahead and take care of this area here on the inside of our subject's hairline. So let's turn our clipping mask off. We'll hold Shift and click on our layer mask. And now we're going to use channels to make this a selection. So let's go to our channels. RGB, I'm looking for the biggest contrast between light and dark. Okay? And it looks like that's blue. So I'm just going to hold Control or Command. That's going to select the lighter areas of that channel. Let's go back to our layer mask. And remember, it's the lighter area, it's the background, so we want to paint that black, right? Let's hide our selection by hitting Control or Command H and then use our brush tool to just paint black. Just right there. It's going to be pretty subtle here because it's on a light colored background. But if we were to just change the color of our background, you can see, now you can start to see through the hair, which is perfect. Okay, so we go to a dark colored background. I'll just want to make sure we grab some of these dark colors in our subject's hair and paint our flyaways so they work for a dark colored background as well. So really it's gonna very much depend. You can even use your clone stamp tool, by the way. Clone stamp, I'm gonna sample this here and then paint my flyaways there. And then you get actual hair texture too, which is an added bonus. Just make sure you sample the right place or it could get too dark and not look realistic. There we are. Do the same thing with these areas here. And of course, you'll want to adjust based on whether the fact you're putting this on a light colored background or a dark colored background. But you can see it works really well here on a dark colored background, and we'll put it on a light colored background and it works there as well. If it works on light and on dark, you can put whatever you want back behind your subject and you're good to go. We'll just do a little bit more blurring right over here and we are done. So let's just hold Shift, click on our layer mask. We can see this is our original image. Alright, let's enable our layer mask, turn our clipping mask on. You can see which just kind of fixes up all these little areas, anything that is inconsistent with color, and we're good to go. So we can turn this layer off and we can see our subject is super well cut out. Her hair looks very realistic and we can put this on any new background. So there we have it, cutting out straight hair in Photoshop.